Good evening, everyone. I'm Harold Holzer, director of Roosevelt House, and on behalf of Hunter President Jennifer Rabb, practically on the eve of Hunter College's 150th birthday, which is Monday. It's a pleasure to welcome you, all of you hardy souls who braved the wind and the rain. I think you're going to feel very rewarded when you see the film and hear the discussion scheduled for tonight. We're very glad that Gail Friedman is here and Nikolai Shpakrov, did I do that right? Shpakov. It's a hard name. Not enough vowels, Nikolai. But we're glad you're here, and we think you're going to enjoy the film. I always do one Roosevelt family history note at these events, because I know you all know that you're in Franklin and Eleanor's home for this screening. These were the kitchens for the Roosevelt home. But when Eleanor found the confines of the house a little too restrictive and her mother-in-law a little too dominant in this house that she built as a wedding present for Franklin and Eleanor, but she was part of the present, right? She lived in the western part of the house. Eleanor was eager for something to do outside of the home. Whatever the motivation, the original motivation for her public service, it became her life's work. How many of you know what her first outside the home, I wouldn't call it an occupation, but her activity was? She taught dancing. At the lower, can you imagine a 6'1" woman teaching dancing? She taught dancing and calisthenics at the East Side Settlement House on the Lower East Side. As always, Eleanor is with us. So even tonight, I think she'd like this film. And let me turn it over now to the head of the LGBTQ Policy Center at Roosevelt House at Hunter College, who will introduce the film and serve as the moderator for the post-screening discussion. Many of you know he is the author of one of the most important histories of the gay rights movement, Gay Metropolis. Please welcome Charlie Kaiser.
Thank you very much, Harold. Thank you all for coming out this evening. We are thrilled to have Gail Friedman here this evening and Nikolai Shpakov. Gail is a veteran documentary filmmaker who's made dozens of important movies. She's also has a history at 60 Minutes and ABC's 2020. Back at the beginning of her career, besides what you're about to see tonight, her notable films include Breaking the Silence, Barrier, Where's the Cure, Generation RX, and Lessons for the Future. And we are thrilled to be showing her movie here tonight. Nikolai was born in Kazakhstan, grew up in the Ural Mountains, and learned to dance before he learned to walk. And he's one of the stars in the movie, and the three of us will have a chance to discuss it afterwards. So without further ado, let's see it. Thank you very much.
Well, congratulations on a beautiful movie. People say directing is 95% casting, so obviously you're a brilliant director.
Indeed.
What brought you to the subject originally?
It was really, in many ways, a fluke, as I think so many things like this often are. I had spent a year and a half prior to that making a film about the making of the 9/11 memorial here in New York City. And while that was not a depressing film per se, it was obviously rooted in tragedy and enormous sadness. And I was looking for a very different kind of a project and something that would speak to my soul in a different way. And my cameraman, with whom I had developed a really close working relationship, we were batting ideas around, and I wasn't coming up with anything he liked and vice versa. And finally he said, I grew up with this woman in Philadelphia, and I haven't seen her in years, but I just heard that she runs some kind of same-sex dance group on the West Coast. And something in the back of my head just kind of exploded, and I said, wow, that's intriguing, tell me more. And he said, that's it, that's what I know. And I said, well, can you find out more? And he said, no, that's what you do.
Yes.
So I said, well, you tell Barbara that I'm going to call her. And Barbara is the older woman in the film who says that dance is a vertical expression of a horizontal desire. So I called Barbara, and she said, you have to come out to April Follies, which was like 2 weeks later, and I had like no money. And we were off to the races, and that's how it began, and it became a real labor of love.
And how many couples did you consider before you ended up with the ones that you used?
Some, but not as many as you might think, interestingly. At that very first shoot at April Follies in 2012, I met Emily and Kieran, and along with a lot of other wonderful people, but either something happened, either a dance partner, either there were two other men who decided they were going to stop dancing together, or there was another woman who stopped competing, or some people seemed like they would be very interesting, but they weren't really very comfortable in front of the camera, as it turned out. They were comfortable dancing when it felt sort of like a semi-anonymous performance, but if they had to try to bare their souls in an intimate way, then they were less comfortable with that. So there was that. And then I met Ernesto Benjamin, who talks about Fred and Ginger introduced me to Ernesto, and he said, you got to meet this guy. And so I went and I met Ernesto, and in about 20 minutes, I had 12 pages of notes about his life story. But he didn't have a dance partner at the time. And I said, well, if you get a dance
Was
partner.
it after the Hungarian dancer partner or before?
Before.
Before, oh, right.
And Ernesto really wanted to be in a movie, as you can imagine. So he convinced Robbie, who he knew. They taught at the same studio here in the city. And he convinced Robbie that they should dance together. And Robbie had been to the gay games. He'd been a champion at the gay games. So that's when he says, I was willing to have fun. I didn't care that much anymore about winning, but Ernesto clearly did. And then, of course, when Robbie got sick, who knew what was going to happen? And had we been better healed in terms of the production, I probably would have flown off to Hungary at that point, but that wasn't really an option. So then Nikolai can pick up the story of how Ernesto convinced him, because he really
How many years had you been dancing with women at this point?
Oh, I've been dancing since I was 10, so I guess before I met Ernesto, I danced for 25 years, so Ernesto was my first male partner, I guess.
Was it the final step of coming out for you? I suppose getting married was the final step, but was it a big step to have a male partner, or did you not see it that way?
Yeah, it's the first time somebody asked me this, but that was a big, probably very big deal. The coming out as a gay person, I guess, wasn't that, it was, I guess, something I had to do, but dancing was different. As he said, when he approached me first, I was not into it. But then it was, now watching, I just said to Gail, I said, it's nice because I haven't seen the movie for a while. And it was nice, just what I said to her, that, it would be nice if we do it every once in a while, years to come, because it's sort of refreshing to see. And of course, you see, oh, I could have done that better. So, of course.
I do that too.
Yeah, so anyway, but yeah, so dancing, with the men, I guess, was the quite a big deal. And since the community, believe it or not, as extravagant and glamorous ballroom community is, in a way, they're very close-minded. And so to come out,
the straight ballroom community.
yeah. So to come out with the whole same-sex idea in this, it was always there, but nobody really kind of talked about it, or it was just they were doing their thing, and mainstream was a completely different thing. And gets for somebody I guess like me, in terms of being in the mainstream, that's my profession, and that's where I did most of my career. To do something like this, it was sort of oh, why? It was quite, I guess, bold, if you will, but it was good. It was a great experience for sure.
And you were telling me before in the green room that America is way behind Europe on this subject. In Europe, they've allowed same-sex partners in mainstream competitions for quite a while.
Yeah, it's been as long as I remember, at least from like early 2000s for sure. But it was always there. Not a big presentation, but definitely you do existed. Where here it's not. And now with this new rule they have, which is
Tell them about the new rule.
yeah, so the new rule is that they actually allow now same-sex couples to participate in the main in the main
But
competition.
it's this year for the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
Just
starting
happened.
just September, and we already have some people like going at it, which is kind of good, But it's a ways to go. I mean, they still have their restrictions, and everybody, it's pretty skeptical. Like they even interviewed me a couple months ago on that subject in terms of what I think, and then they were showing me interview with other people, and this other people were like, oh, basically like this is no, 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 or like it was just like very different opinions. But I guess that's a good thing to have different opinions about things.
Gail, you obviously decided pretty early on that this was going to be as much a movie about relationships as it was about dance. Tell me about that.
I think that was, for me, was true from the beginning. I mean, the dance was,
A metaphor.
yeah, and it was gorgeous, and it was entertaining, and it was novel, and it was a way into a story. But I don't know that I would have made the film to be, just about dance. It was always kind of the small p political dimension, which became a bigger P because when I started this, we were in a different political era in this country, and couldn't have envisioned where we are now. But I think that it always, throwing up questions of gender identity and gender roles, and how do people put family and personal passion, and there's a lot of other issues embedded in this, and some of them evolved with the film, some of them I knew from the beginning. I mean, there's a strong secondary theme in the film about immigration, which didn't start out to be a primary theme, but as I got to know the characters, and if you think about it, other than Emily, all of our lead characters are immigrants. And so the whole notion of, what's an American and what is identity and how does that all connect, and that became a very important thread. So I learned very early on in my career that you tell a story, you don't tell an issue. And if the story is told well, hopefully it illuminates the issue and it's not teachy-preachy. So yeah, for me it was always going to be about something, the dance, but more than the dance.
Right. Nikolai, did it change the way you dance to have a male partner from a female partner?
Yeah, definitely, and it keeps changing and growing because it's such a different experience dance as two different parts, because it's a whole different exits and entrances into the steps, and the approach, and when you always lead, you like always sort of in one, I guess, way. But then when you have to switch and then you have to give, and that's a whole different dynamic. And it's like, as I said, like with watching the movie now, it's I think I would do it better now, dance-wise, but the movie's done, but it's keep growing on me in terms of experience I gain from this, and the whole new perspective on what things are like, just technically, logistically in dance as well.
And how is the marriage?
Marriage is good. Yeah, marriage is good. Kids are good. Everybody's moving along, growing, and
How old are the girls?
the girl's gonna be 4 in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Are they dancing?
Well, they, like we take him to the dance class, but I'm not sure. It's like I was telling the other day, they had the first school concert, and it was just so funny. Sorry about the kids, but like how every parent looking at their kids with a magnifying glass and see something nobody else seeing. Even with that glass, I couldn't see much. I was like, okay. I'm not upset about it. It was just like, it was so funny. But no, it's a joy for sure.
Has your father fallen in love with his grandchildren?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. They, they're great parents. They just moved here to the country, and
They moved here. They moved to.
yeah, we all happily living together. John's happy. Nobody speaks Russian, English in a house, but I'm telling him it's a blessing, especially comes to my father's. Like, it's very short conversations. But no, they're very happy here. They're very happy to be with the kids, and it was actually kind of funny because like, I mean, my father is in his early 60s, so is his wife, and it's hard for them. It's a big step to move from the other country. And I kind of, at some point, I asked them because we were planning, and the papers and this and that, and then they said, well, we have you here, like, her daughter is, his wife's daughter is here, and the other daughter is like, she's gonna be here too in a year. So they basically is like, we have nothing to do there. Like, I mean, yeah, they have a family like this and that, but they kind of like, this is where our family is, and we want to be here. So they're making it work for sure. So watching them grow now too here, hopefully soon will be some English, I mean, not for me, for John, because
How long after you came out to him did it take for him to become relatively civilized on this subject?
I think with the kids,
Right.
the kids, I guess, solved everything somehow. Where I guess, the wedding and all of this, it was, he kind of accepted, but once the kids came into the picture, it was like, I was not the focus anymore. So it's just, I think he can care less now. So anyway.
What was your biggest surprise in making this movie?
That's interesting. I think I surprised myself in terms of what a complete passion it became for me. I mean, I've made a lot of films over the years.
Had you ever done any ballroom dancing before you made this movie?
No, I had done other dancing, but not ballroom dancing, actually. But it was the people. I mean, it was Nikolai and the others, and really seeing that there was a way to take what had initially attracted me with its beauty and its joy and its lightness, and then that it then became something deeper, and that had a lot more nuance and a lot of texture. And I just got completely obsessed with getting it done. And I have plenty of unmade films in my drawer, along with all the ones that have gotten made. And I think it surprised me how completely it ended up capturing me, and that was a gift to me, really.
Well, you must have felt like you struck gold when you finally got engaged to get married.
Well, and that we were with them on that early date.
Yeah.
No, Gail, I mean, she did a remarkable job, especially, like, I don't know anything about the movie business or anything, but especially when it comes to documentary. I mean, instantaneously you think it's going to be some sort of Hollywood situation, but it's not. And then you find out that documentaries, it's just generally something most of people do because they love it so much. Right. It's not, and give you credit for pulling it all together. So, and be part of this experience for sure. And for me to have that piece, like for my kids, and just like look at it, and just, it's because movie fell exactly like, I mean, I have to say, like, I'm not gonna say any tweaking. She did any tweaks, other tweaks with other characters. With me, it was actually naturally work exactly like in the time frame. Like, basically, it kind of just happened amazingly. Like, where I went from empty house to dance partner, husband, and the kids and everything. So, it's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions from the audience? Sir, now wait for the microphone. Here it comes.
Thank you, both. And I wanted to ask Nikolai, he was saying that more and more in Europe, this same couple dancing is the norm or is accepted. And I wonder how it is in the Soviet Union with all the repression.
Doesn't exist. Actually, at the gay games, it was it was so adorable. It was this Russian group, like they came, and these people came to me, and they were like, "Oh, we excited about gay games and everything." And then I look at their when they were dancing, and I realized they don't know how to dance. But they were from Moscow, someplace, and I said to Ernesta, I said, "These people have no idea what they're doing," but they were so happy to be at the event and just participate. It was just sort of like, so as far as like if you take serious dancing, I guess, like, professional studio dancing, it doesn't exist. And it's actually this issue, I think China, I think Russia, like they don't, it's just not,
What, no same-sex dancing there?
no.
The next gay games are supposed to be in Hong Kong, and there's still some real question about how that's going to work out and what the reception is going to be. So I mean, there are still challenges many places in the world, even though Europe is way ahead of America in some
Europe
regards.
is, but Russia, no.
Russia, not so much.
No.
Questions?
We saw some other hands.
We saw other hands. What happened?
Gail, I wanted to know about the funding, the funding of the film.
Yes.
Who supported this? Were people supporting you, or were they supporting the idea?
I guess it was a combination. It was a really difficult film to get done. I somehow in the beginning thought that it would be a lot easier than it was. It was primarily individuals, small family foundations, and then once I got farther along, a couple of other larger foundations kicked in, but it was individual money, and it was either people who believed in the vision, had a passion for the story, knew me, and had some trust and faith in me. And then, we got it, and I put some of my own money in, which is a really stupid thing to do at any stage of life, but particularly now. And kept thinking I'd recoup it, which, doesn't happen. But we got it made, and there's a lot of music in the film, obviously, and the music rights were the single largest line item in the budget.
Always the case, I think.
Yeah, well, and I kept wondering on the way why nobody had made this film before, and I came to understand that that was a big part of the reason why. And I sort of knew that somehow, and I kept thinking, well, I'll figure it out later. I'll figure it out later. I'll figure it out later. So we got to the festival.
You did.
Yeah, amen. But we only had bought festival rights for the music initially, and at Newfest here in New York City, which was one of our first screening was in San Francisco, and then here in New York, and I had done other films, to make a living, obviously, along the way to getting this film made, because it took 5 years for it to get done. And so one of my clients was the Atlantic Philanthropies, and the founder's daughter I had gotten to know a little bit in the process of making the film, and in fact, her name should have, this was the wrong print of the film, I realized, because her name should have been on it. It is on the other print. In any case, I invited her to come to the festival, and she lives on the West Coast, so I didn't really think she would, but she actually changed her travel schedule, and she came, and she fell in love with the film, and she said, is there anything I can do to help? And I said, well, I'm trying to buy music rights so that we can actually sign with the distributor and get a theatrical distribution and the streaming rights and all of that. And so she came on as an executive producer, and she got somebody else to match her gift. So you never know what leads to what, but it was down to the wire the entire time. I mean, there's a lot of things I would have done differently if we had had budget from the beginning, but it was quite the opposite. So I thank you for the question. It was the biggest. People always say, "What was the hardest challenge?" That was the hardest challenge. Yeah.
One more question. Yes, ma'am.
Gail has a new piece coming out, and I would love it. I fell in love with Gail's work, and I've become such a fan. And now I'm excited to see what she's going to be doing with Crazy People. And I'm really hoping that the people who are inspired by your film today understand what it means to have to drive this and think about contributions. So, thank you, Gail.
Thank you. That's very kind. I really appreciate that. When she says crazy people, I'm working on a new film that couldn't be more different. It's about severe mental illness, and it's derived in part from a book written by an old friend of mine, and the name of the book is No One Cares About Crazy People. And so it's a very different kind of topic, but in a funny way, there's a through line for me, which is just always, stories of enormous humanity, which somehow then speak to all of us, whether or not we have any experience in that realm. So still pretty much at the front end on that one, and hoping that one doesn't take 5 years. But, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I thought the movie was absolutely splendid. Please give our stars a big round of applause and join us for a glass of wine upstairs.